Professor, I've heard that sentence and I've read it off teleprompter thousands of times in the last 4 years. Why is this one going to be any different?
Well, this one might not be different, Alex. We may end up going right down to the wire, as we did, of course, with some of the previous agreements during this long Brexit saga. But I think the mood music is positive. I think we've seen some breakthroughs around the issue of the level playing field and state aid. There are still some messy negotiations to be had around fishing, and it hasn't been helped, of course, by COVID-19 inserting itself into the EU negotiation team, which has delayed things a little bit as well. But I'm fairly optimistic. I'm happy to go out on a punt and say that I think we will have a deal, but I think it will come very late on.
Do you think Boris Johnson has actually made up his mind at this stage?
I think he probably has. I think Johnson is not quite as ideological as some of his critics would have us believe. I think he has been a pragmatist at key points in his career. And I think obviously the context has changed from the days when Johnson was gunning hard for Brexit. We now have the biggest economic crisis since the Second World War, and we've got a rapidly moving landscape. And I think that Johnson, much like the EU actually, will probably come down on the side of getting a thin deal and moving past this moment rather than try and inflict some more collateral damage into what is already a highly volatile situation.
How does a thin deal become a real deal?
Well, the thin deal will provide some basic pathways, if you like, basic agreements around fishing, around state aid, around governance structures, and we'll get them over the line. And we'll allow Boris Johnson to turn around to say to his all-important new electorate, his more working class northern electorate, that he's delivered that thin deal. And then, in essence, they can continue to finesse that relationship going forward under different governments. But crucially for the UK, of course, it means that we can crack on and get as many of those trade agreements with non-EU states around the world as we can.
How pivotal a moment was it that Dom Cummings departed 10 Downing Street? It was denied that this was going to have any impact on Brexit. Do you think it will, though?
I think actually the departure of Cummings is significant, Guy. I've known Dominic Cummings for a few years. I've known some of the people around the Conservative Party for a longer period of time. And I think despite what all of his critics say, the one thing about Cummings is that he understood the electoral reality of British politics. He understood the realignment that's going on in British politics, and he understood how to exploit that in order to benefit the Conservative Party and, of course, benefit the Leave campaign during that referendum. And I think there is an open question mark now over the Johnson premiership, which is, with Cummings gone, who else in number 10 understands the realignment that's unfolding in British politics? And that's not a popular point to make, Guy, but I think it is critical to understanding how the Johnson premiership evolves from here on.
To that point, just from a more international view, I'm wondering what the role U.S. politicians have played in coming to this moment. Oftentimes I'll ask this question and British analysts will say, oh, nothing. President-elect Biden had nothing to do with it. But then I read other articles that say that that's not true and that the relationship to the Irish is key in keeping that border open. What's the truth there?
Well, the immediate truth around the recent bill that the government tried to get through the Lords is that that was rejected by the House of Lords and wasn't really dependent upon what President-elect Joe Biden said. However, much of the talk here in London, where I am, much of the talk in Westminster is about this incoming president who has very different views of Brexit. We've also heard this morning that the suggested new Secretary of State is also quite anti-Brexit, has compared Brexit to the rather uglier forms of populism in Europe, like Marine Le Pen in France. And that's got people, I think, understandably a little bit nervous about what that means for the Anglo-American relationship going forward, that special partnership. Some are wondering, will Biden and his new Secretary of State look past London, and will they look instead to Paris, Berlin, Rome, when trying to think through some of the broader macro geopolitical issues? And that's going to be an open question mark. I don't think Biden has impacted the negotiation as of today, but longer term, this new incoming president is going to have considerable impact upon what's happening here in the UK and the EU.
I read a lot of notes that suggest that Brexit is a sideshow for the British economy now, and that the implications of COVID and the amount of money that is being spent, and we'll hear more about that this week from the Chancellor, are by far and away the more pressing issue. Would you agree with that?
Well, we've had some forecasts over the last few weeks, Guy, that have suggested that, for example, a messy no-deal Brexit may end up being more disruptive for the UK economy than the COVID-19 crisis. I think I've seen competing evidence that suggests actually the opposite, that over the longer term, paying off the £2 trillion of whatever the cost of COVID currently is going to actually prove more impactful on the UK economy. But it all comes down to, I think, ultimately what the future economic and tax strategy is going to be for the Johnson government, and where they're going to choose to really lay the burden of the current crisis. Are they going to focus, for example, on the changes that we're hearing about around capital gains, self-employment changes? Are they going to opt for a sort of a new growth strategy as we come out with some sort of Brexit deal? I think all of these are open question marks over number 10, which is at the moment, this week, really going through something of a relaunch. I mean, let's not forget, we're a year into the Johnson premiership, coming up in a couple of weeks. And so far, even today, many of us are asking, what is Johnsonism? What's the intellectual, ideological foundation of this project? We still don't really know, because some people are suggesting maybe there isn't one. Let's see.